as we remain studying, we will be led in prayers by Reverend Father Kemani, Chaplain, Kenya Prison Service. Father. Let us pray. We come in humility before God this day as we thank Him for everything. Members of the task force, if you can kindly come forward so that you are introduced quickly. Faster, please. If I can get a handheld microphone. Thank you. This may be the only opportunity they have of saying something, as they mentioned the hearing, and I actually request them only. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Honorable Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, allow me to ride on the protocols that have been established. This is the great team informed by servant leadership that has developed the consultation paper that we'll be presenting today. We are looking forward for the enrichment and the final output. We remain your sincere servants. And now allow me to ask them to introduce themselves. Just name and organization. Thank you very much.
Wanjohi Peter, Secretary Administration, State Department for Correctional Service.
Charles Otieno, Independent.
Jedida Nyongo, State Department for Correctional Services.
Caroline Atieno, State Department for Correctional Services and Probation and Aftercare. Thank you.
Alice Matangani from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Ndunda Emmanuel, Kenya Prison Service.
John Kamau from the National Police Service.
Matekwa Michael, Probation and Aftercare Service.
Lucas Anina, the Kenya Judiciary.
Christine Mangwana, State Department for Correctional Services.
Maureen Odendo from the Office of the Attorney General.
Samuel Kioko, State Department of Correctional Service.
And I'm Humphrey Young, State Department for Correctional Services.
Angus Masoro from the Kenya Prison Service and the Vice Chair. Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. As they walk down, I want to mention briefly that the journey, which has a time frame of 9 months, is on course. And what we've done so far is engage in both primary literature collection and secondary benchmarking with other jurisdictions with best practices, and of course respecting that the practitioners in both prison and probation service know where the shoe pinches. So this is a tailor-made process that we believe will set the pace so that the correctional services in Kenya stand out. And with that, thank you very much, sir, for giving us the opportunity. As was mentioned before, I'm Christine Obondi, Secretary Probation and Aftercare Service, and the chair of the great team that has been presented before you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you allow me, sir, I will now invite the Commissioner General, Kenya Prison Service. make some brief introductory remarks. Can you help me with the microphone, please? Help me with the microphone.
The Prime Cabinet Secretary and the Cabinet Secretary for the Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, His Excellency Dr. Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, the Principal Secretary, State Department for Correctional Services, Dr. Salome Biako, Honorable Kagushia, member of JLAC, that is Justice, Legal and Affairs Committee, and also member of Parliament for Mukurweini, all distinguished guests, our partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, my name is Patrick Arandu, and from onset, first of all, allow me to thank you most sincerely, particularly remembering on 25th when I was sworn in as the Commissioner General of Prisons. His Excellency the President pronounced himself on matters, salaries for the disciplined services. It was on 25th day of last month, and immediately after, on that first, you did release a communication to the Office of the Head of Public Service, and consequently, we did receive a concurrence that the Kenya Prison Service officers receive a salary increment, and for that we are thankful to you and to His Excellency the President. I wish to express our gratitude to you, sir, for finding time to come and be with us during this launch. From onset, I would like to commend the committee. Indeed, they have done a great job, and we want to commit as Kenya Prison Service. We are more than delighted to see that finally review of our regulations and policies has started to take shape. I would want to say that some of the recommendations which were done by the Maraga Committee will definitely be realized now, and as a service we commit and want to assure you, Your Excellency and the government will forever remain committed in terms of giving our service, and most of all, ensuring that we execute our duties with discipline and diligence. With those few remarks, I want to appreciate this opportunity and reassure you that the Kenya Prison Service remain committed to serving in this great nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner General Arandu. If it pleases Your Excellency, I will now invite the Country Director, IDLO, who have supported this program so far, to make some remarks. Welcome, Country Director.
I may be too short for this. Thank you very much. That's fine. Your Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, the Honorable Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, the Principal Secretary in the State Department for Correctional Services, Dr. Salome Biako. Allow me please to stand on established protocol. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow development partners, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my pleasure this morning to stand before you, Your Excellency, on behalf of the development partners. I stand on my own behalf as the International Development Organization, but also on behalf of other partners that have partnered with the State Department for Correctional Services in the journey towards correctional services policy and legislative reform. Your Excellency, if I may, just indicate that for us as development partners, this is a very momentous occasion, because this is the moment that I think for many of us that have been looking at law reform in corrections have been waiting for, the moment to formally launch the public consultation on the development of the National Correctional Services Policy and Bill 2024. Today, I believe, is a crucial moment, not just for correctional services, but the nation of Kenya. As you have seen, Your Excellency, we have seen that this process is going to be led by the National Task Force, which was gazetted by the Cabinet Secretary for Interior. And what we have seen is that this is a team that is led by experts in the justice and correction sector. So we believe that this is a process that will not only be led by evidence on the ground, but it will also be led by understanding of the Kenyan context. And the important thing, Your Excellency, is that policy and legal reform for correctional services is a fundamental step towards ensuring that the correctional systems in Kenya aligns with international human rights standards and best practices enunciated in the Constitution of Kenya, but also in international legal frameworks. By updating and modernizing the legal framework, we hope to see a legal system that is equitable, that is transparent, and that serves the role of not only punishing but also rehabilitating offenders. This morning, Your Excellency, I had the opportunity to engage with both the PS and the Secretary for Probation and Aftercare. And we noted that while it's important to invest in the legal reforms, it is also important to think of corrections as part of the continuum that is the justice sector response. And I think one of the things that as development partners we have not done well, and I think we are starting to do now, is really to support State Department for Corrections, because often the focus has been on investigations, prosecutions, and maybe adjudication, but not on corrections, and yet that is the tail end, and I think the important part of responding to crime and rehabilitation in the society. So it is my hope that this process of consultation will not only give Kenyan views to legislation and policy that responds to how to deal with offenders and their reintegration, but also to strengthen the system and the institution that is the State Department for Corrections, including, of course, prisons and probation and aftercare. We hope that through this launch, the technical committee will also extend partnerships with other government agencies and other partners represented here this morning so that we have a well-informed and robust product that will take into account perspectives and insights of everybody represented here this morning. We believe that it is important to give this process our support, which is why we are here today for this launch, and we hope to be there for other launches as the public consultations happens throughout the country. We believe that it is important that this process is led by Kenyans, and it has been led by Kenyans, as we have seen from the technical team that will be leading this process. And we look forward to enriching discussions, not just in here this morning, but even as the engagements continue across the country. I would like Your Excellency at this point to reiterate our commitment as development partners to support the priorities of the government of Kenya in putting in place a robust correctional services policy and response in the terms of the appropriate legal policy and legal frameworks. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the Country Director, IDLO. If it pleases Your Excellency, I will now invite Honorable John Kagushia, who is representing the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee in the National Assembly and also Member of Parliament for Mokoraine, to make some brief remarks. Mheshimiwa karibu.
Thank you very much. His Excellency Honorable Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, EGH, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs and Diaspora Affairs, also Defense, Interior, Agriculture, Finance, Gender, and all the others. Dr. Salome Biako, our CBS, the Principal Secretary for Correctional Services, Mr. Peter Wanjohi, Secretary Administration, State Department for Correctional Services, our Commissioner, and all the distinguished guests that we have with us here, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am pleased to address you during this launch of the public consultation for the development of the Draft Correctional Service Policy and Bill 2024. I'm honored and wish to thank the organizers, presenters, and facilitators of this meeting for their efforts towards organizing this and for extending an invitation to the National Assembly's Department Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs, JLAC. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the State Department for Correctional Services has been instrumental in furthering public safety and security by ensuring there is safe custody of all persons who are lawfully committed to prison facilities, as well as facilitating the rehabilitation of custodial sentenced offenders for community reintegration. Allow me to recognize the continuous efforts of the State Department for Correctional Services on its devotion to democratic governance and the rule of law. Our nation's commitment to justice and rehabilitation is enshrined in our legal system, and understanding this framework is crucial for ensuring that humane and effective treatment of those within our correctional facilities. Correctional services are governed by a robust set of laws and regulations designed to uphold the rights of inmates while promoting rehabilitation and reintegration into the society. These include Article 51 of the Constitution, and read with the Prisons Act, Cap 90, the Probation of Offenders Act, Cap 64, the Postal Institutions Act, Cap 92, and the Community Service Orders Act, Cap 93. Consequently, the appointment of the Technical Committee on the Development of Legal and Policy Framework for Correctional Services in Kenya was not only a statutory requirement, but also a demonstration of our democratic values. Its mandate ensures inclusivity, transparency, accountability, and legitimacy. Distinguished guests, despite these legislative frameworks, challenges persist. Overcrowding remains a significant issue in many Kenyan prisons, leading to poor living conditions and limited access to essential services. It is important to recognize the endless efforts of the State Department for Correctional Services for working on various initiatives, including the construction of prison facilities, expanding the existing ones, and the promotion of non-custodial sentences. The Kenya Prison Services has been actively involved in reform aimed at enhancing the professionalism and welfare of prison staff. Continuous training and capacity building programs are essential to ensure the correctional officers are equipped to manage prisons effectively and humanely. The role of civil society, organizations, and international partners cannot be overlooked. They have been instrumental in advocating the prison reforms, providing support for rehabilitation programs, and monitoring compliance with human rights standards. Collaboration between the government, civil society, and international bodies like the IDLO bodies is crucial for continued improvement of correctional services in Kenya. A renowned civil rights activist, Michelle Alexander, once said, "The laws governing our correctional services often reflect broader societal issues. True reform will come not just from changing the laws, but from addressing the systemic inequalities that feed into the prison pipeline." The State Department for Correctional Services has provided Kenyans with enlightening tools with this launch. I implore everyone to take advantage of this and remain aware of all the avenues available for effective legislation and legal measures. Distinguished guests, as a member of committee mandated to investigate, inquire into, and report on all matters relating to the mandate, operations, and estimates of the State Department for Correctional Services, I am pleased to witness today's launch. Furthermore, in monitoring and reporting on the implementation of the department budget, this launch demonstrates the prudent use of public resources. To this end, I pledge that the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs is committed to supporting the department in whichever way to effectively discharge its duties. I know when you're on budget cuts, the PS will be in doubt of this commitment, but indeed we remain committed. As a significant player in the governance and justice sector, I hope the National Assembly continues to develop its strategic partnership with the State Department for Correctional Services while upholding its independence and autonomy. Distinguished guests, as I conclude, allow me to thank the State Department for Correctional Services for its continuous efforts to embrace values and principles of transformative leadership and improved service delivery, including universal justice, integrity, credibility, and may I urge all the relevant stakeholders to continue collaborating with the department for it to effectively discharge its mandate while staying true to its mission to promote a just and secure society through efficient and effective management of offenders and administration of justice. Thank you very much.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa. And now, Your Excellency, sir, the Principal Secretary, State Department for Correctional Services, Dr. Salome Biako. Madam PS, karibu.
Your Excellency, Honorable Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary and CS Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, and Acting Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior and National Administration, the Commissioner General of Prisons, Mr. Patrick Arandu, Secretary, Probation and Aftercare Services, Dr. Christine Obondi, who is also the Chair of the Technical Committee, the Country Director, International IDLO, Teresa Mugadza, our very valuable partners and stakeholders, senior officials from government presence, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. At the onset, I wish to thank you, Your Excellency, for your speedy and timely intervention to ensure that our prison officers will get their increment as directed by His Excellency the President, and we are most grateful for your intervention. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you today to this important occasion as we launch public consultation on the development and legal and policy framework for correctional services, and thereafter disseminate to our valuable stakeholders and members of the public the consultation paper on correctional services, legal and policy framework. Ladies and gentlemen, from the onset, allow me to thank most sincerely His Excellency Dr. Musalia Mudavadi for agreeing to grace this important occasion. There is no better way to demonstrate your commitment and support to the ongoing correctional services reforms agenda than your presence here today. Equally, I wish to express heartfelt gratitude to all of you for finding time out of your demanding schedules to attend this meeting. Your Excellency, as the government agency responsible for coordinating implementation for correctional policy and programs, the State Department for Correctional Services sits at the core of our national security and the wider criminal justice sector. It contributes to community safety through humane containment of offenders and ensuring that offenders are rehabilitated, reformed, and reintegrated back to society. All these functions are pivotal to the attainment of an all-inclusive and transformative society. To reorient the management of correctional services to speak to the current offender management practices in line with the Constitution and to consolidate the fragmented laws governing correctional practices in Kenya, the Cabinet Secretary, Interior and National Administration appointed a technical committee to develop a new legal and policy framework for correctional services via Gazette Notice number 5621 on 30th April 2024. Your Excellency, I am delighted and appreciative of the strides made by the technical committee thus far. The team is now planning to conduct public participation on the development of the legal and policy framework for correctional services. To aid in this, they have developed a consultation paper that seeks stakeholders and public views about the proposals for correctional services policy and bill aimed at reviewing and consolidating all laws related to correctional services and offender management. Your Excellency, before I call upon Dr. Charles Otieno, our technical advisor, who has been pivotal in supporting the team to take us through the consultation paper, I wish to sincerely thank IDLO through their country director, Teresa Mugadza, for facilitating the activities of the technical committee thus far. In the same breath, I recognize with a lot of appreciation the input of all the other stakeholders represented here today for their continued support towards improving the management of correctional services. This is our country, we are Kenyans, and it is our responsibility to advance the vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm here to perform a task that soon will be performed by a robot called Courier with artificial intelligence. But allow me today to perform it because it's an important task for the nation. I'll take only 5 minutes to take you through the framework. And what we're going to look at are the main issues that are going to form the topics for consultation. We all know that our correctional system has the laws that have been mentioned. We have the Kenya Prison Service, and we have Probation and Aftercare Service. We also have Directorate of Children Services that deals with rehabilitation of children in conflict with the law. So the correctional system exists in Kenya. It's been functioning since 1902, and the problem is that most of the laws since 1946 have never been reformed. So the process that we are undergoing is to make sure that the correctional system undergoes reforms that are in line with the Constitution, but also in line with the international best practices. So we've identified about 27 issues that we want to consult the public on, but they can be summarized into 10 topics. The first one is rights and obligation of offenders. The second one is administration and management of correctional institutions. The third, coordination of correctional services institutions. Fourth, offender management. We are looking at custodial and non-custodial offenders. 5 is aftercare and resettlement of offenders in the community. And then 6 is oversight of management of offenders. And then 7, parole system. 8, prison enterprise. And 9, oversight and accountability of correctional services institutions to the public, to Parliament, and the rest. And then number 10 is training and professional development. So the team has looked at all these issues and identified some of the areas that they want to consult the public on. The first one is that aligning correctional services legislative framework to the Constitution requires that certain principles are respected. One of them is upholding the Bill of Rights. The second one is promoting public safety. The third is professionalism and discipline within the services. And the fourth one is diversity and inclusion. These will be subjected to consultations. The public need to tell us how they want this principle to be respected by the correctional services institutions, and we hope that the consultation paper will guide the discussions. Then we have the other key areas that we're going to consult on is the institutional framework for management of correctional services. The first one is Kenya Prison Service, looking at the Office of the Commissioner General and the deputies, the function of that office, the appointment and the term of service, and then the role of Prisons Council as far as the service is concerned, youthful offenders institutions, how they should be managed and coordinated across correctional services, including coordination with children services, and then responsibilities of prison officers. So those consultations will, the consultation on Kenya Prison Service will follow that particular line. Then we have Kenya Prison Service, Probation Service. We're going to look at the Office of the Secretary Probation Service, the constitution of that office, the function of that office, the role, and then we look at the Probation Council that is going to bring in all the agencies that are involved in probation and aftercare so that there is one body that supports the oversight. And then all the institutions around probation service, including community rehabilitation institutions and offender management services at the community level. And of course, we'll also look at powers and duties and responsibility of probation officers. Then the other part that we're going to consult the public management of offenders, aftercare, and resettlement. And here we have three main issues. We are going to look at custodial offenders, the issues to do with admission and classification of offenders, sentence planning of offenders, treatment and rehabilitations. Then we'll also look at non-custodial offenders and supervision of the community, and then the parole system, how parole system should be administered in the correctional services. Then finally, so we hope that we look at training and professional development. Here we have three main issues: training policy and curriculum for correctional services, training institutions that will be established and managed by correctional services, and then establishment correctional services leadership academy, and how that academy should help in promoting providing leadership courses for correctional officers. Again, we hope that the public will be able to help us, including the services, on how that should proceed. Finally, we are looking at oversight and accountability. There are four main issues there: internal complaint mechanism within prison and probation services, inspection of facilities, independent investigation of complaint from offenders and also members of the services, and stakeholder engagement. So again, we want the public to tell us how they want to see internal complaints managed within prison service, within probation service, how facilities should be inspected by the state and internal systems, how independent investigations should be conducted, in what mechanism should we set up mechanisms for investigations, and then how stakeholders should be engaged in correctional services. Then here's the consultation process that has been proposed. We have public hearing and field visit that is being launched today. We hope to have about from 26th August to 29th. We will have one in Nairobi, Kisumu, Kakamega, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Embu, and Garissa, and then Mombasa. During those public hearings, we'll also visit the institutions also to hear from offenders also, and to hear from their customers. Then there'll be stakeholders consultations. Some of the stakeholders are represented here from 9th to 10th of September. This will be done in Nairobi. We have stakeholders from the criminal justice system and also some from the state organs, and we also have external stakeholders. Then there'll be thematic areas consultations with key technical departments and experts on Kenya Prison Service and probation and aftercare. Thank you. So the topics again, as I said earlier, and we hope that these are enough to guide us. Thank you very much, sir.
Your Excellency, in a nutshell, that is what the technical committee has been doing, and these are the highlights of where we are thus far, and eventually we want to see that by December, as outlined in the work plan that is before you, Your Excellency, that we will have a correctional service policy and a correctional service bill ready for submission to Parliament, where I hope Mheshimiwa will speedily expedite the process of enacting the same. Thank you. And now I want to open this session to plenary and invite feedback and reactions from all our stakeholders and development partners, because this is an inclusive process. All of us are involved in this, and we all have a stake in ensuring that the process succeeds. So you're welcome. Any volunteers? We want to hear anything, the good, the bad, the ugly, criticism, any feedback that will help this process, and I believe this is the start of the public participation process. Karibuni. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Selina Iseme. I'm from the Public Service Commission. Just something I've observed. One of the areas that the team will be consulting on is diversity and inclusion. And I've observed here, there's no sign language interpreter. I don't know whether we are inclusive in terms of that diversity. So maybe as a comment, as a team goes out, the public is diverse. So ensure that the people that come to give their views are also diverse because they have a stake in what is going on. So you will have to confirm that the venue is accessible and whatever presentations are being made are also accessible. I had a time when we were doing public participation and the venue was on a 12th floor of a building and it didn't have a lift and people came in crutches. You can imagine how that happened. So just a point of caution. Thank you.
Thank you. That is well noted.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Moses Maranga, Executive Director, NCAJ. Maybe with your permission, PS, allow me to say that the Honorable Chief Justice would have wanted to be here, and she said that she supports the process, stakeholder engagement, and the entire justice sector, which she heads, and NCAJ is committed to the process. Having said that, I know we have just interacted with a few slides. Please allow me to mention that I have seen several regions. The team can explore other stakeholder engagement initiatives. Nowadays tunaona watu wakiongea kwa X-Space. Perhaps I don't know kama siku moja PS tutakupata huko ukisikiza maoni, but it's something maybe the team can explore. Plus many other forums which may not necessarily be regional based, but ICT based. Thank you.
Thank you. That is well noted.
Thank you very much, the chief guest and the PS. My name is Laban Ayiro, the Vice Chancellor DASTA, but also a member of the International Correction Education Services. And I think the presentation on the framework was a little rushed. So maybe you need to create space within your programming for people to interrogate the framework and then be able to send in their contributions. But I'm hoping that as we go through this framework, there are key imperatives internationally that you need to make reference to. One is the human rights compliance. I think this one we must be very strong on it as Kenyans. Two, rehabilitation and reintegration. And that's where the universities are coming in and other partners. I think that is very critical, rehabilitation and reintegration. Three, the policy framework must emphasize improving infrastructure in our prisons. Our prisons are centers of hell on this earth. There's so much overcrowding and healthcare is minimal. Four, legal reforms. Our penal code, the criminal code have to be looked at extensively by the team that is working on this. Five, staff training and welfare. I think our prison officers have been subjugated to those conditions of prisoners, and so their training and welfare needs to be included in this framework. And number six, I think as a country, because of the overcrowding in our prisons, we must have alternative sentencing as a thrust in the policy framework. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you're working around those ones, but they must come out clearly. The challenges, a good policy framework should be bold enough to bring out the challenges so that we can bring in objectives and be able to cost them. A framework without budgetary implications is just a piece of paper. So we need to do that by looking at our challenges. But I'll submit a paper on strategic recommendations that can go in this policy framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. We sincerely appreciate that feedback. I believe the committee will take that into consideration, particularly what you have alluded to in the last bit of the challenges and the budgetary implications. We will take that into consideration.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mombi. I think my main contribution is, so I'm somewhere in the middle between a Gen Z and a millennial. So the phrase public consultation is a bit sensitive at the moment. So my plea is just to make sure that the actual contributions by the people who we are here for, who are the inmates, are actually taken into consideration. I often find myself conflicted when we come in spaces like this. We're in a nice hotel and we're having sausages and nice coffee, but the people who we are actually here for, as the person who's spoken before me has mentioned, are in hell, more or less. I was once arrested and stayed in for an offense that I didn't commit. It was very little, but I would not want to be there again. So I've seen there's a long schedule of public participation hearings, but the people who would tell us most about what will make a difference are the poor and marginalized who often find themselves in prison, and the ones who are in prison themselves. So as the per diem is being pocketed, please let's not lose focus of the people who we are actually doing this for. And if it helps, let's remember that at the very end, we are actually accountable to God for the resources that we've been given and the chance that we've been given to make a difference to these people. Thank you.
Thank you. That is well noted.
My name is Mary Airo, the National Coordinator of the Paralegal Society of Kenya. And I want to give my view as a person who has practiced or worked in the prison for many years in different prisons in the Republic of Kenya. And I want to put emphasis on the issue of infrastructure. And I'm putting that with the focus on the intersex persons, that we now have quite a big number of intersex persons. And looking at the case that we had some times back, where this person made their way into our prison. The first prison that this person made their way was Langata Women's Prison. And from there, after the search, they realized that this is an intersex person. Then the person ended up in committee prison, and where this person suffered a lot of violations. So the prisons, our prisons do not have that. Were built perhaps at times when we did not have the intersex persons. So that must be put into consideration. The other thing I'm looking at is children accompanying their mothers in prison. And I'm saying that because having practiced in the prison, I have seen these children that many times it is the welfare officer who goes out of their way to get partners who can actually provide food for these children, food in terms of food for children, for example, milk, and other things for young children. So as we look into that, I think it is important to actually factor in these children that accompany their mothers in prison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is noted.
Thank you, Madam PS, Your Excellency. My name is Peter Oko. I stand on to fronts. I work in the criminal justice sector, and I'm also an ex-inmate. And I'd like to raise just 2 issues here. Number 1 is on the prison's earning scheme. I hope it's captured when we go into that. Because after many years of someone serving in prison and they come out and they can't start their lives afresh, even though they have the skill set, it's hard to reintegrate. The second bit is the issue of certificate of good conduct. If you've rehabilitated someone, they've come out, they want to start their lives afresh, they can't get jobs because of that certificate of good conduct. They've paid their dues to the society, on the other hand, they can't get jobs. I hope that is also captured. Because I know, even within our system, and His Excellency Musalia knows very well, that one of his key brothers, Honorable Raila Odinga, is an ex-inmate at committee, but he gets jobs and is now getting a job at the AU as you're championing that. So what I'm saying is just about the equity level, where we can also champion for the others also who've been through the same committee and they can get jobs, even the TVETs. Madam, you know you have some of the best trained instructors who've come out of prison after many years and they can't get jobs even in the TVETs to train our people. So those are the things I wanted to raise. Then finally, I hope there's a policy also as we work on compensation for wrongful convictions. Because there are people who've gone through the system for crimes they didn't commit, they come out of prison, they can't start their lives afresh, there's no compensation policy for wrongful convictions. I know the NCAJ has been doing a great job. Some of the laws that we want to look at, they've actually been working on them. So I hope some of these things will be captured to have equity in the justice system. Thank you.
Good morning again. My name is Maurice Kaberia. I work with Justice Defenders. We work in prisons. I'm also an ex-convict, having served some years in death sentence. First of all, I want to recognize the efforts, even with the previous act of the Prisons Act, the CAP 90, of the Prisons Service of Rehabilitation. Because while in prison, that's where I studied, I got my law degree, and now I'm almost joining the bar very soon. So I wanted to see whether we can be able to do also a policy on education, because it's a great and impactful rehabilitative tool. We have bodies and organizations which support education in prisons, but the government itself, and I hope our Excellency, the Prime Minister, Prime Cabinet Secretary hears this, is that the government does not put enough money into prisons for education purposes. And this is a sector where most of people who land in prison actually had problems. Most of the times we criminalize poverty because people who are illiterate don't know even their rights, don't know even how to avoid going into crime. They want bread for them, for their children, for their families, and they find themselves in crime. But if they had an opportunity, maybe through education, they could have done better and become better citizens. So to stop crime and to reduce the rate crimes in Kenya, I think we need to look at this point about educating people who are in prison so that also them, when they come out, they can be able to educate other people on how to avoid crime and become good ambassadors of a free society, crime-free society. I also want to touch on paralegalism. Most of our inmates who are in prison today, and Madam PS, you know this, that most of the inmates are remedies, people who have been remanded awaiting trial. And most of them cannot even afford the services of advocates. So what are we doing in this policy, this act? Where do we place paralegalism in prisons? I think it should be a section, a clearly defined section on paralegalism, allowing paralegal officers, both prison officers and also inmates, to do the paralegal work like we do. We've done it practically, you can see it happening. We have paralegals who are officers in prison and they are helping inmates to assess justice. So I think this can be done and can be included in our policy and act and this will give a more humane society within the community in prisons. Thank you.
Madam PS, Chief Guest, thank you so much. My name is Isao Riaro. I work for Legal Resource Foundation Trust. Thank you so much for having us here. Some of the issues I wanted to raise have already been raised, so allow me just to commend you and the team for taking this process forward, the team led by Dr. Bondi, because the reforms have been long in the making, and we are glad that finally we are going to have the fruit. I'd like to humbly request if we could get a draft of the bill as early as we can so that we were able to interrogate it and share our views. As civil society organizations working within the correctional facilities, we are keen to support this process, and we have a lot of materials, some which we shared with Dr. Maraga. I'd also humbly request if we could have an email, because I've seen that in terms of public consultations, if we could have emails, and also where we could deposit the memorandums even ahead of the public hearings. Just to conclude by thanking you once again for the good work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam PS, Honorable Prime Cabinet Secretary. My name is Hamisi Mzari. I work with Justice Defenders. I just want to highlight what my brother Maurice talked about paralegal work, but I want to bring the perspective of the legal aid work. Looking at the team that is working on the current correctional bill, I do not see members from the National Legal Aid Service. And almost half of the inmates in prisons are those who are undergoing trial. And out of that number, a great majority of them, around 80% of them, do not have legal representation in court. And they're the people who are overcrowding our prisons at the moment. We have organizations that are offering paralegal work to train these inmates on self-representation. But we do not have any legal framework that ensures that some of these organizations are funded. The National Legal Aid Service in itself is not funded enough to provide legal representation for these inmates who are awaiting trial and they're in custody. It is a constitutional right that every accused person must have legal representation, but it is not a reality. Looking at the framework I've seen, we are leaning too much on the convicted prisons, the offenders, their rehabilitation, but we are forgetting this critical mass population in prison that requires legal representation and may end up being convicted wrongfully or not receiving justice. How are we going to ensure that the same is also incorporated in the new bill, which will become an act, so that we can have stakeholders, partners, and government ensure that we have somebody like an office of public defender, or at least we have a way of funding for those organizations that are offering this legal aid service to inmates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those ideas that have been advanced are valid, and I think the technical committee, the Secretariat, has taken them into account, and I think we will address all of them, and we see where some of them fit. Obviously, some of them are cross-cutting, and probably we will take them to the National Commission on Access to Justice, because some of them are domiciled in other justice sector players' departments. So, but the ones that are domiciled in our department, we will take them into consideration. And Your Excellency, I'm happy to report that indeed it is true. From our facilities, we've had graduations. Recently, we had 14 graduate from in law. Then we have one who is going to graduate soon in a Bachelor of Medicine. And we have others who've graduated in mechanical engineering and veterinary medicine. So indeed, it is true, and I agree with the delegate that it is important that we have a robust and concrete education policy within the system, so that the persons who are incarcerated do actually benefit from the education sector. We already have an education unit that is doing a tremendous job to ensure that the persons who are sitting exams are actually incorporated. Again, we will also take into consideration the issues raised about parole, about a stipend, and that's why we have the prison enterprise being one of the issues that will be tackled by the bill and the policy. So I thank you all very much for all the ideas that are advanced, and we will take Dr. Maraga's idea into consideration that we actually go into the X space as a way of public participation. Perhaps it may wind up being even more effective. So I thank you all, and I wish to hand over the matter to the issue, the session to our MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. And as the PS goes back to the podium, yes, the document will be available from immediately after this function. We'll give a link where you can download, but all of us here will have a hard copy of the consultation paper. Madam PS.
Thank you very much. And now it is my honor and humble duty to invite His Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary. I request we all be upstanding so that he can come and make his remarks. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Dr. Salome Biako, Principal Secretary, State Department for Correctional Services, Principal Secretaries present, Excellencies, Heads of Diplomatic Missions, Ministry officials, stakeholders and partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. In the last few weeks, I've been mutating from one role to the other. So I'm eagerly waiting for the vetting process to come to an end and Parliament to finish its business so that I can stop mutating. But nevertheless, I'm happy to be here with you this morning so that I can share some thoughts and at the same time inaugurate this very important journey that you have embarked on. So I'll be making my formal speech shortly, but let me, I'm slightly taller, is it? Okay. Let me just start by making a disclosure. In 1982, when I was a student at the University of Nairobi, I also had my brush with the law, and I also spent my few days in custodial territory. So I can understand a bit of what is being talked about here, because we spent some time as students after being rounded up in 1982 for allegations of having been involved in that process. And some of us spent time. So I have a fairly good idea of what it means to be behind the bars. But that is for here. So I am delighted to join you here today for the launch of public consultations on the development of a legal framework for correctional services. This gathering signifies a powerful convergence of minds, a collective commitment to our shared vision of a prosperous and harmonious society. Together, we stand at the threshold of transformative change in the management of corrections in Kenya, ready to embrace new horizons and strive towards a better tomorrow. The exercise we are launching today comes at a particularly critical time, given the tensions that persist between the rights of offenders and the aspirations of our people to build a more inclusive Kenya. The state of our correctional services institutions, including congestion in prisons and poor living conditions of our correctional service staff, have widely been criticized. Indeed, any conversation about correctional services elicits emotional issues about human rights abuses, corruption, drug abuse, and other vices that we really need to correct. And I will come back to this specific area towards the end of my remarks. This process, therefore, marks a new dawn in the government's commitment to overhaul the legal framework for correctional services to align it with the Constitution and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Our responsibility is to develop a robust legal framework that complies with universally accepted standards and helps to improve the livelihoods of our people, particularly at the bottom of the pyramid. The Constitution upholds important commitments to the advancement and administration of justice, including correctional services. Furthermore, Kenya is a signatory to various international statutes with obligations in relation to the fair and just management of offenders. I am pleased to note that the bill we are discussing here will amend the Probation of Offenders Act, Cap 64, and Community Service Orders Act, Cap 93, and repeal the Prisons Act, Cap 90, and the Postal Institutions Act, Cap 92. The overarching goal is to ensure the legal framework for correctional services are in line with the Constitution and upholds universally accepted international standards and best practices. In fact, the PS was telling me that once this is done, Kenya would be the first to achieve this particular unification on the continent. And I told her, in that case, then it must be done. The bill will move forward the vast majority of previous task force reports and recommendations, including the National Task Force on Improvement of Terms and Conditions of Service for members of the National Police Service, Kenya Prisons Service, and the National Youth Service. The direction we are taking will enable us to tap into the collective wisdom and resources of the global community, ensuring that our corrections transformation efforts are not isolated, but resonate with Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the East African Community Vision 2050, among other international obligations. This will provide an opportunity for us to amplify the impact of our initiatives, foster partnerships, and most importantly, contribute to a more just and secure world for our current and future generations. I wish to assure you that my office will support the current efforts by the State Department for Correctional Services to expand opportunities for the transformation of our correctional services in the country. My office will also oversight and coordinate the process of developing the new legislation, including ensuring constructive public participation and stakeholder engagement. This will enable us to develop an acceptable legislation that responds to the challenges we have experienced in managing correctional services. Let me encourage our development partners and stakeholders to actively work with us on this journey by supporting the reforms being undertaken by the Department of Correctional Services, as well as the wider security and criminal justice sector. This will enable Kenya to benefit from the emerging skills, investments, and networks driving correctional services on the global stage. Let us appreciate the leadership of the State Department and the Technical Committee for spearheading this important exercise. The experts involved bring together a rich blend and diversity of skills, competencies, backgrounds, and experiences that will contribute to the success of this process. I also wish to recognize the International Development Law Organization and all other partners and stakeholders who have passionately contributed to the success of this initiative. Finally, let me assure Kenyans that this exercise is being carried out with utmost good faith and intentions for the betterment of our people and our country. So, what do I wish to contribute? Because I think we've started off to a very good start. Just sampling the comments from the various members, and indeed the position also taken by my colleague politician, the Member of Parliament from Ukuruini. I said I wanted to come back to a particular issue. You talk of congestion, you talk of how do we deal with the conditions and so forth. I want to point out that listening carefully, I did not see where you want to integrate the private sector in this. Now, where am I coming from? In other countries, and I'm sure you have that, in other countries, there is a public-private partnership arrangement where custodial facilities or prisons can be developed by the private sector on a PPP basis, and then meeting the standards and the requirements that the government designs in the legislation. You can then have private sector investing in these facilities, because there's no way a government will have enough money to undertake this exercise. Somebody talked of the mothers with children, but they're in custody. There could be a blueprint of a design of facilities of this nature, which then can be brought out on a PPP basis, then developed by the private sector. And these are the kind of facilities that mothers who have to undergo that challenge can go. People with disabilities may be required from time to time, perhaps, to also face correctional services. What kind of facilities are we putting them in? So you can actually work with the private sector to develop this, and it will be easier because then you don't have to put your money directly into it. It's done, and through a proper arrangement defined in law, these facilities can be built and you can reduce congestion across the board. Of course, the hardcore elements would have to be within the custody and the preserve of the department and the government itself. But this, I believe, is a window that we have never exploited in this country, and it is being exploited and it's being done in other countries. If you walked in a lot of the other cities, whether you are somewhere in Europe, you'd be walking past a prison and you would not know that it is a prison. It's been built to standards, and those standards can be done. So my contribution as a public member of the public is that in your document, please make provision legally where you can embrace private sector involvement in reducing the infrastructure capacity that you are facing. Because the government may not have enough money for that. The taxpayer may not have enough money for that. So please consider that. The other thing that I may now want to say is that it is true that there's the Maraga report, and our men and women in uniform within the prison service, that their matter is receiving very high level attention, and as the Commissioner, Director General the Commissioner General did mention, it's going to be addressed. So it's important that I also put that on record so that we don't have undue anxiety. And I want to assure you that the PS and the new commissioner have been very, very aggressive in reminding me that there was a presidential directive that must be upheld. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, let me thank you for being patient, and also to say that just listening, there's a lot of knowledge in this room, a lot of knowledge and experience. Utilize it well so that we can have the best bill, the best framework going forward. So it is now my privilege to officially launch the public consultations on the development of a legal framework for correctional services. Thank you, and God bless you all.
I will now most humbly request Your Excellency to join us and the Principal Secretary and those seated on the high table there so that we can press a buzzer and launch the consultation paper. Most kindly, Your Excellency. Being set, and the chairperson kindly. And now, launching the consultation paper, ladies and gentlemen, tumpigie makofi wakati inakuja juu. Sauti, the sound, kindly. That is the consultation paper. That is the consultation paper that will be handed over to the Principal Secretary to take to members of the public in the public consultation. Asante, asante. If you allow me, Your Excellency, I will invite you here to present the hard copy of the consultation paper to the Principal Secretary, to the Commissioner General Kenya Prison Service, and to the Secretary of Probation and Aftercare Service, ili waende wapeane kwa members of the public. 3 copies. Nisaidieni tuondoe hii tafadhali. Asante. Na ingine moja kwa mheshimiwa, members of the parliament. It's important that parliament has a copy. Hiyo moja, asante. Ya pili ya kwanza to PS, ya pili kwa parliament. The third one to Commissioner General Kenya Prison Service. Ya nne to Secretary Probation and Aftercare Service, and I welcome them here for a photo opportunity. For a photo opportunity with the documents that we have just launched today, and Your Excellency to confirm that everybody in this room will go home with 1 copy so that they can go study and give within 2 weeks. That is the period given. And also members of the public through a link. May I request IDLO to join for another photo, kindly. Na niombe kwa heshima Wanjohi naye pia join for that copy, for that photo as a member of the State Department. Thank you. Your Excellency, as you are still on stage, the State Department has prepared a gift as a memento for this occasion. Na nitaomba tuletewe. The Principal Secretary, the Commissioner General will present the gift to Your Excellency. We start with that one. We start with that one. That is the first gift to be presented by the PS, the Commissioner General and Secretary Parks from the State Department of Correctional Services. Ya kwanza is a stool ya mzee na mkwaju pia wa mzee. Asante, asante. And finally, a plug from Your Excellency. Those are made from Kenya Prison Service, and that one is from Probation and Aftercare Service. Asante. And now a plug saying thank you from Probation and Aftercare Service. Asante sana. As we take those documents, I now request you come forward so that we receive the national anthem. We remain standing as our guest leaves at his pleasure, na ndiombe kila mmoja wetu asiondoke bila a copy of the draft consultation paper.